good understanding, a good heart to understand, and love for each other. In Christ's name, amen. All right, so we're studying the book of 1 Peter. And we're in chapter 4. Here's the chart we've been using. Can you see it up there? Yes. Here's the chart we've been using. We're in this section red there on suffering. The suffering cleanses. And I'm not going to go back, just take the time this morning to go back through the theme and all that stuff that we did before. We can, and if you want recordings of these classes, they're all on YouTube and so forth for you to look at under the live stream recordings. But anyway, let's take a look at these scriptures here beginning in verse 1. So read with me 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1, and we'll try to move on this morning from where we've been. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, meaning as a man on the earth, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lust of men, but for the will of God. I don't think verse 2 means that, or the end of verse 1 means that once you suffer, you stop sinning. It's obviously the purpose of the suffering is to help you stop sinning. That's the point he's making. That's the purpose of the suffering. So you can learn from that and stop sinning. But he says you shouldn't be living the rest of your time in the flesh. However, whatever age it was you became a Christian, you don't live the rest of your lifetime doing the lusts of the flesh to do the will of men, to learn to do the will of God. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. Comment on this, that he used the word Gentiles here in a specific way. A Gentile is someone who's not Jewish in the way it was used back in that time. You're either Jewish or you're Gentile. Gentile from the Hebrew goyim and then the Greek ethnos, the nations. An ethnicity is a nation. Doesn't mean a nation like Germany or France or not. A nation was an ethnic group of people, spoke the same language, had the same culture. That's how the Bible uses it. And God divided up the world into nations at the Tower of Babel when he divided the languages of the earth. The cultures became different and they separated themselves out. Then you begin to see external differences like skin color, height, hair color, all that stuff, because they separated themselves out from the beginning. And that's what we see today then. And now in modern times, we put nations together. We put ethnicities, ethnos, together. So we have the Czechoslovakian Republic, the Czech Republic, and the Slovaks. Let me tell you something. Czechs and Slovaks don't get along naturally. They're two different ethnicities, okay? And different types of Hungarians don't get along. And that's all the way around the world. We in the United States talk about Africans. Do you realize the size of the continent of Africa and how many different ethnicities and nations live in Africa that don't get along with each other and have never gotten along with each other well? They don't want to be together. They want to be with their own nation, ethnos. Now, in the United States, we threw everybody together, and we have our own problems because of that. We also get along better than a lot of places. I know it's presented to you that we don't, but compared to a lot of places in the world, we get along better with different ethnicities, but we've become one nation. I think I said this before. If you are a white American and a black American, you have much more in common as a black American than you do with someone from Africa. It's presented that you would have something in common. You don't have anything in common with somebody from Africa. Your skin color maybe. But what you have in common is being an American, and that's a big bottom line, a base of who you are, because we're a nation, an ethnicity. Now, he says here, though, I've gotten too far afield here, doing the will of the Gentiles. So Gentile by itself is not a pejorative word or a negative word necessarily. It's a descriptive word of someone who's of the nations, not Jewish. But because the majority or the preponderance of the Gentiles at that time were idolaters and immoral, it became a synonym for someone who is idolatrous and immoral, living, well, as you say, they walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries. That's his description of the Gentiles. Now wait, Mike, you can't use a stereotype. Not allowed to use generalizations and stereotypes. Okay, you take that up with the Holy Spirit, because that's who did this. Was the Holy Spirit using a generalization or a stereotype of Gentiles here? He was. Is every Gentile a drunken, immoral person? No, they weren't then, they aren't now. But he's used this as a generalization for a type of thinking which was not Christian or not biblical, and a type here of behavior. Now, he doesn't describe all the behavior of the Gentiles, because you have Romans 1 and some other passages that describe in detail what the Gentile culture was like during the New Testament and before. And it was pretty bad in general. Although you had men like Cornelius, you had all kind of other men who were good men who were Gentiles. But in general, wasn't very good. He says he gave the nations up and they walked in their own way. God just let them go wherever they wanted to go. And they went away from God. They did not go to God. Even the Jews went away from God. But anyway, notice what he does say about them. So his description of the will of the Gentiles is to walk meaning live in, lewdness, lusts, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. So 3 out of the 4 preponderantly have to do with intoxication and drinking. He describes here. Lewdness, lust, and abominable idolatries include those things probably, but we talked about lewdness and lust on our last class. But he says about this, in regard to these behaviors, these ways of living, lifestyles, to walk in something, we would call it a lifestyle. Not a one-time act. It's a lifestyle of walking in something. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them to the same flood of dissipation or excess of riot, the King James says, speaking evil of you. I think the King James says excess of riot there, or excess of dissipation, meaning a flood of dissipation. Dissipation is wasteful behavior, pointless, wasteful behavior. So we look around us and we see people in our culture, have known them all along, who have wasted their lives with all kinds of intoxication and vice and drunkenness and gambling and all kind of adulteries, and they've ruined their life and they've wasted their life. It never comes to any fruition. That's dissipation. So it said these behaviors will lead you to a flood of this wastefulness, uselessness. And but these people speak evil of you because you won't do it. You stopped doing it. You used to do it. Now you stopped, and so they speak evil of you when you stop. But they will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel was preached also to those who are dead, meaning in the past, that they might be judged according to the men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. The question there, and we'll come back to this, whether the dead here are physically dead or spiritually dead. I think that's the question. But we'll come back to that. Now, I want to look at these words. A lot of you are not going to like what I'm going to have to say this morning, so that doesn't bother me, except that I want you to think about what I'm going to say. And I understand that this subject is not necessarily cut or dry. There's edges on it that have to be examined. And it's easy to make too big of statements, and it's easy in this to make too small of statements about this. These words he uses here have meanings, and they mean probably stuff that our culture doesn't like. Does that surprise you, living in the age we live in, that God would say things about our behavior we don't like? It doesn't surprise me, because, pardon me, a lot of people in our culture are walking in the way of the Gentiles. How do I know that people in our culture are walking in the way of the Gentiles? Well, I can read those words. I can read the words here of lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatry. They're walking in that pathway. So what pathway are they walking? Same as the Gentiles. And people don't like it when you say this isn't good. So let's look at these words. Here's some alcohol words. Not all of these are in this passage, but they're related to this. The word for drunkenness is methe. So there's two kinds of alcohol. Don't get them mixed up. If you want to drink, don't drink ethyl alcohol. Some drunkards do and they die. Don't drink ethyl alcohol. Drink methyl alcohol with an E, methyl. Well, what's this word in Greek for drunkenness? Methyl, methe. Okay, it's the same word. It means, in the Greek, it's used 3 times in the King James. AV means King James. Intoxication and drunkenness. And then there's to be drunk, methusko. You see the same word? That's to be drunk. One is drunkenness as a condition. The other is to be drunk or to get drunk, the process of getting drunk, some versions say. To intoxicate, to make drunk, to get drunk, to become intoxicated. So it is a process. You become methusko, and then you get to being drunken. You see, it's a process. Is there a hard line between being not drunk and being drunk? Is there a hard line? 0.08. Legally 0.08. Legally, but what about morally? Is there definitionally a hard line? There is not a hard line. Had a friend in high school, they called him 3 beers. That was his nickname, 3 beers. 3 beers, he was basically passed out. Huh? That's you? Okay. They called him 3 beers. He didn't wear that name proudly, because a few of us could drink 15 and not be intoxicated. But anyway, he didn't wear that name proudly, but I don't think it's good to wear the name 15 beers either. But in any event, it's a process. And that's the whole problem with this. That's the whole problem, is that you can't put a finger and say, yep, 4 is too many, is okay, 5 is too much. It's a process to go from sobriety, sober-mindedness, to drunkenness. It's a process. Okay, it's a continuum, we would say, a gradient. That's what this word describes in the Greek. Now then there's this word wine bibbings, onophlugia. Onos, the first part of that word in Greek, the O-I-N-O, it means wine. It's the Greek word for wine. Now in Greek, and we know this from classical Greek as well as biblical Greek, that described the grape on the vine. The grape on the vine itself is an oinos. You squeeze the grape into a jar and you get juice. That's called oinos, or wine. And then you turn it into wine or vinegar. If you just take grape juice and squeeze it in a jar and leave it, you won't get wine. You'll get vinegar. Okay, and you'll get alcoholic vinegar, but you'll get vinegar. You have to do things to it to make wine, to make what we call intoxicating wine. Today they add sugar to make it stronger. They didn't do that in the New Testament. Didn't have much sugar at all over there in that part of the world. They had honey, but that, and they made alcoholic beverages with honey called mead. But oinos is a broad-ranging word that means the grape all the way to the strongest wine there is, or intoxicating beverage. You know this from classical Greek as well as regular Greek. The phlugia means an excess of it, overflowing of it, like the word flood, kind of like the word flood. And this means then drunkenness. So a person who engages in wine bibbings isn't one who is engaged in drinking a lot or continually drinking. And we know people like that. They continually drink from the time they get up to the time they go to bed. Or every weekend, they drink all weekend. But it doesn't always include that necessarily that excess, although I think excess is kind of built into the word. The phlugia is the overflowing part of it. And then that's a drinking party banqueting. King James says banqueting. This would correspond to our social drinking. Drinking at a dinner party, drinking a little bit here all the way through the evening, here and there. This is what this is. This isn't just sitting down and getting drunk. Now, some people do that at a banquet, but that's not what this is describing. This is a troublesome word to a lot of people because this describes drinking a little bit over a period of time, and it's called carouse. Now, we use the word carousing in our modern English to mean a wild party, but that's not how it was used back then. It just meant having an evening full of intoxicant beverages and food, okay, or a time of that, a party, a drinking party. And so this would cover what we often call social drinking. Now, I know there's variation in social drinking, how much you drink. This would cover what we call social drinking, in my opinion, looking at the words. Where you're there and you're going to have cocktails and then wine with dinner and then more cocktails after that. It's an evening of entertainment. Or this is what, when you have people over, you do this. You drink through the evening. That's what this covers. That's what it's talking about. And the point of it is, intoxication is a little part of the evening. When I've been reading articles, there's a new thing called, now I can't think of it. Anyway, it's, I'll tell you the new thing that young people have discovered, sobriety. That's weird, isn't it? They've sworn off drinking. The beer companies, I just saw the reports for Anheuser-Busch the other day. They're way down in income over the last few years. Now, not just because of Dylan Mulvaney and the ads they ran, but all the beer companies, all the wine companies are suffering economically because Americans are not drinking as much as they used to. Did you know that? They're not. Huh? Maybe not the people you know, but they're not drinking as much all the time. Now, the same people who like to drink are drinking just as much, but a lot of young people are sworn off drinking. It's called casual sobriety. That's one word for it. Meaning they're not really working at being sober. They just don't drink very much. They drink something else at the party so they can look like they're drinking. They drink something that looks alcoholic, but it's not. Or they have one watered down drink in the evening instead of 5. But this is becoming more common. You know what? I'm so cynical. That's because marijuana has replaced alcohol as the intoxicant. And kratom and these other kavas and kratums have replaced alcohol.
Yeah, and other drugs.
Huh?
And other drugs.
And other drugs have replaced. So drinking, they say drinking is harmful to you. So they don't do that. So they just do marijuana, which is really harmful to you. What are you laughing, Bob? Am I wrong about this? That's what they've replaced it for. Yeah. And the other thing is the police can't test for being high on marijuana very easily. You can get immediate test on alcohol, but you can't get it on marijuana. So it's easier to be intoxicated and drive home on marijuana or other drugs than it is with alcohol. So there's a lot of reasons why the Gentiles are going this direction, but social drinking. Now, see, my point is this. When the Bible talks about drunkenness and sobriety, it's not talking about alcohol and ethyl alcohol alone. It's talking about whatever is intoxicating. Whatever chemicals you use that are intoxicating, that's the problem.
There are a lot of factors that can cause one person to become intoxicated faster than another.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that cause one person to be intoxicated.
Water in the body and things like that.
Like what?
Body weight.
Body weight, yes.
A heavier person.
So you all need to be fat and you can take more alcohol. There are a lot of factors. Now the question is, and that's why we talk about even in social circles, knowing your limits and all that kind of stuff. So I couldn't stand up here and say, if you have X number of drinks, you're okay, and if you have X number of drinks, you're a sinner. Wouldn't be able to say that because the subject being discussed is intoxication. And it's a gradient. Now, what the Bible does recommend in all cases is sobriety or clear thinking. That's why I know the Bible teaches that. Oh, we had a whole class on this recently on Wednesday nights. It is sobriety. So I can certainly talk about that. But this potos, banquetings or drinking parties, is an interesting word to think about because it's challenging to what you're going to do, how you're going to navigate this. And we had a discussion about this, I guess it was in the last month or two, about navigating a social circumstance where people expect you to drink and you don't drink, and what they say about that, and how you deal with all those situations. And the truth is, it's going to be a problem for a Christian to navigate being completely sober. Now I'm a teetotaler. You have to know that. I'm a teetotaler. I'm not a pastor or a priest who drinks and goes to drinking parties. And this is big in evangelical circles. Drinking is becoming more popular among certain kinds of conservative evangelicals. And they do a lot more drinking. But I'm a teetotaler and was raised that way. Doesn't make it right. So my perspective is that. I think I can justify that. I don't think I have to justify that to anybody. I don't have to justify to you why I don't drink alcohol. You have to justify to me why you do, not the other way around. I'm just going to say that out front. Yeah.
What's a tea? You said a teetotaler?
Teetotaler means nothing, no alcohol. I do NyQuil though. Now we're going to come to that. We're going to come to that. If I took NyQuil because the way it made me feel, I would be moving toward intoxication. There's a difference between the medicinal use of drugs and the social use of drugs.
I think some alcoholic will actually drink.
You think what, Doug?
Some alcoholic will actually drink mouthwash and some other things.
Well, they drink mouthwash and other things because it has alcohol in it. Yes. And if you're really a bad alcoholic, you'll find that mouthwash, and you'll find all kind of other things that have alcohol in them, including the isopropyl alcohol, which will kill you. You even do that. But yes, so teetotaler is an old word for someone who doesn't drink at all.
Just drink iced tea.
What's that?
Just drink iced tea all day.
They drink
Iced tea.
iced tea? What about iced tea?
That's why they're a teetotaler, because they just drink iced tea.
Oh, is that why it is? Okay, I did not know that's why. Because they drink iced tea, huh? A teetotaler. I'm taking the source into consideration here. But I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I can run with that. Even if it's not true, I'll run with that.
I've heard that saying all my life, but I never realized that that's what it meant.
I didn't either. Well, somebody can AI this. Somebody can look it up and see where's the phrase teetotaler come from.
It's an individual who abstains totally from consuming alcoholic beverages, a practice known as teetotalism that originated in the 19th century British and American temperance movements. Often motivated by health, religious, or personal reasons, they reject all alcohol, distinguishing themselves from moderate drinkers.
Right, so the temperance movement begun by a bunch of crotchety old ladies because they had drunk husbands, and nobody considers, when you look at these women, you can see why their husbands drank. They began this movement to get rid of. Well, have you not seen that picture of one of their posters? These awful looking old women, and it said, "Lips who touch alcohol shall never touch mine." And I'm going, yep. Anyway, it's funny. But the point is, there's reasons, look, there's reasons for everything. There's reasons for everything. There's a reason why some people are teetotalers, because they have a moral problem and all kinds of, there's good reasons for being a teetotaler. And there's good reasons for, this. Everybody has reasons. Some of them are understandable, some are justifiable, some are understandable, and some are not. Just because you can give a reason for something doesn't mean it's a good reason. And giving a reason doesn't justify anything, but it explains something. And that's true for all these. But a teetotaler did, the word did start in the 1800s, late 1800s, most in the United States, and it says there Great Britain. And women like Carrie Nation, I think, is one of the first founders of the American Christian Temperance Union. That's part of the movement that led to prohibition in the United States, the outlawing of alcohol. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got two comments.
Speak real loud. I'm having lots of trouble this morning.
I often wondered on TV, they show a nice group of people like this. They always have beer and drinking, having a good time. Why don't they show that car accident that totally
I know.
crushed and people didn't survive? And if you and I and a couple of guys go out and get drunk, we're just filthy drunks. But if we've got money, we have a problem. You know, we're not a low-class person. You're saying somebody that does not have money is a drunk. Somebody that does have a lot of money, oh, they just have a little problem, you know, drinking. So they make excuses, you see.
Yes, they don't tell the whole truth about that, do they? Not even close.
So is it a sin for a Christian to drink?
Well, you're jumping way ahead, Sharon. Is it a sin for Christians to do? So you want me to summarize this into one or two words, yes or no, right? Hold on to that thought. Hang on, I'm trying to bring this up here. Maybe I can bring it up. Why won't it open up for me?
If it was a complete sin for Christians to drink, why would Christ make alcohol, wine alcohol, for the people to drink?
What was new wines, so it wasn't.
Give me just a second here, folks. I'm bringing something up here. I'm going to mess all this up. And, well, here, I'll do it this way. That ain't going to work. Give me a second. I'll find it. All right, we haven't gotten anywhere close to answering that question yet. Okay? I know you want me to start there, but I'm not going to start there. Not right now. We're going to get back from this a little bit and go at this a different way. So give me a second here. I don't think it's worth what I'm doing, but I'll do it anyway. Okay, so here's the picture. Oh, you can't see it. Never mind.
We could see it.
You get the gist? Yes. Lips that touch liquor shall never touch these. I thought it was a hilarious image from years ago. Anyway, that's some of the words. Now there's more words that he uses here. Revelings, that's komos. It's a revel or a carousal, a nocturnal and riotous procession of half-drunken and frolicsome fellows. Notice the phrase, and this is from the Greek lexicon, half-drunken and frolicsome. What's that mean? This is a frat party kind of atmosphere, a party, who after supper parade through the streets with torches and music in honor of Bacchus or some other deity, and sing and play before houses of male and female friends, hence used generally of feasts and drinking parties that are protracted until late night, indulging in revelry or partying. So that's what he's talking about here. This is a significant portion of American culture at various stages or various generations. It looked different in the 1800s than it did in the 1950s, looked different in the 1920s than it did in the 1970s, but this is a common feature of things now. Now these events are held at clubs. They tend to, because of the problems of going through the streets, laws being passed, they tend to do this at a particular club. So you get a room full, a big room, with loud music and dancing and half-dressed people, all half-drunk, all having a carousal. This is a nightclub. This is other kinds of clubs. Should Christians be a participant in that? I say no, because I think that's exactly what's being described here in this word for revelings. It's exactly what's being described, and I would say that's something the Gentiles did that you shouldn't be a part of. Now, this is different than having a glass of wine with dinner, isn't it? I mean, there's a degree, at least. They have to acknowledge that there's a difference between this behavior and having a glass of wine with a certain kind of meal and supper. Now, I haven't said that that's okay or not. I'm saying there's a difference in the two we should recognize in a reasonable way. Now, I put this up here. So Paul told Timothy, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. Now, this is often used by Christians to justify drinking. That they'll say, Paul told Timothy to drink wine. What's wrong with me drinking wine? Well, that analysis is very self-serving and shallow, in my opinion. Not that I want to be opinionated about it, but it's very shallow in this sense because it doesn't take into account what's being said. Is he telling Timothy to drink? No, he's telling Timothy to use medicine. That's what he's telling him to do. How did they use alcohol? The Americans are very unique in the world to some degree about this. We drink for the intoxication. I've known several Italians, I told you this before, raised in Italy. They drink, but they don't drink just to be intoxicated. They drink with their meals and so forth. And my one neighbor, there was a Giancarlo Mangione. I never saw him intoxicated, and I know he drank. Go to his house, got a whole wall of alcohol. Never saw him intoxicated. In fact, he complained about our other neighbor, an American, who came over, and John says, I call him John, he says to me, you Americans, all you do is get drunk. So I have you over to my house, and all they do is get drunk. Because he didn't think that's what, I said, well, now look, John, I said, that's what Americans do. They drink to get drunk, to be intoxicated. And the reason is, there's a kind of a simple reason for this. In the ancient world and in Italy, good drinking water was often, especially in ancient times, hard to come by. That's still a big problem around the world. And so they would take mildly fermented wine and dilute it, put a little bit of it in the water, and they figured out this would keep you from getting sick. And so they used wine as a medicine in their water. That's why it says in John 7 about the wedding feast, oh, see, Jesus made wine. We can all have a big party and get drunk as Jesus made wine. You didn't read all of it. Because it says that they took this and made it according to the Jews' manner of purifying. What does that mean? It means they diluted whatever strength of wine they had, which was usually 2 to 4%. That's natural wine. How many, can you go to the store right now in this town and buy 2 to 4% alcohol? You can't even buy beer that's small. I know you can't buy wine that, most wine is 20%. They take and add sugars to it, they cook it, they all and get the alcohol percentage way up. In the ancient world, it would have been 2 to 4%, maybe 5%. And then it says that the Jews would dilute it 3 parts water to 1 part wine. They would dilute that mild, barely alcoholic wine with water 2 to 1 at least. Now, how much of that would you have to drink to get really drunk? You have to drink a lot. Why did they do that? They did it because it made it, they could drink the water, it tasted better, and it did remove any bacteria and stuff because it had enough alcohol to kill all that. That's why they did this, and that's why Paul is telling Timothy, who has stomach problems, don't use only water. He didn't say use only wine either. Don't use only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and infirmities, because Timothy was sick a lot apparently, and he needed him to be well so he could teach. So he would put this in the water. It would improve his stomach. Now, if you just drink wine, it's not good for your stomach. Especially this 18 to 20% wine is not good for your stomach. Doctors will tell you this. What does the latest report on alcohol say? Here's what it says. There is no safe level of consumption of alcohol. That's what the latest report says. There is no safe level of consumption of alcohol. Not one drink is safe. Does it mean you can't do it? No, I never said that. But you can't say, oh, you need 3 glasses of wine a day and you'll be healthier. The research doesn't support that at all. Never did support it, actually. Oh, it's better for your heart. Not according to the latest research, has no effect. In fact, it makes it worse. So there's been a huge shift in people's thinking about alcohol in the world of medicine. Now look, the Bible doesn't say don't drink because you'll be healthier. That's not why it's saying don't drink. It says don't drink so you'll be sober. That's a different reason. But so if the medicinal use of alcohol justifies the social use of alcohol, does the medicinal use of drugs justify the recreational or social use of drugs? What do you think about that? If it's okay to use alcohol because you can use it as a medicine, is it okay to use cocaine because cocaine can be used as a medicine? Or fentanyl, or propofol, or whatever it might be. You see the skip in logic there? It's a big skip to say that the medicinal use of a drug, like what's in NyQuil, justifies the social use of that same drug in your life. And that's what you're doing when you take 1 Timothy 5 and use it to justify all drinking, because it doesn't fit. And so you have to have some other kind of thing. So you have here, was that the second bell, Joel? Okay, thank you. Man, I got to get my hearing aids checked this week. I barely heard that back there.
What do you do about John 2?
What am I going to do about John 2? I'm going to ignore it, Doug. Yeah, I'm not going to get to it today. I did mention John 2. I mentioned that they diluted that wine 2 to 1. So let me ask you this. So Jesus made wine at a wedding feast. Do you think he made wine so the people would get drunk?
No, but he made wine. It was good wine.
The good wine. Oh, that means heavy alcohol, right? Only an American would say that. Only an American would say the good wine's the strongest alcohol. Now that's different. Because in the ancient world, the new wine, or the strongest wine, the old wine was stronger in alcohol, but it was not considered the best wine. It's another misreading of that passage. We'll come back to that. I'll get to that next week. So you have all these words. We'll get back to that next week. I know it's time to stop. All right, here we go. We'll finish up. Thank you very much for your participation today.